Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I am Elizabeth Lizzie Neufeld, and I'm the CEO and founder of Strat Labs. We are a social impact marketing, communications, and philanthropy agency. We are Colorado-based, woman-owned, and we help corporations, movements, and leaders power their purpose. We empower mission-driven organizations to find the soul in their work that drives strategy, storytelling, engagement, and impact. So we really like to help our clients achieve their mission through comprehensive marketing, communications, and public awareness campaigns. And we have a proven track record of excellence in developing and implementing these successful campaigns. Our approach is grounded in deeply understanding the unique needs and aspirations of consumers. So that said, little is really known about how consumers and their behaviors around companies' ESG goals and targets is going to play out. I'm sure you all, if you're working in this world, know that we're having trouble kind of measuring what the consumer really feels about ESG, CSR, and are they putting their money where their mouth is. So when we just finished a project for a very large corporation, and it represents some of the world's largest brands, and in doing our research for that project, we were struggling to find any type of consumer insight study that was later than 2019. And we all know how much the world has changed since 2019. We ended up surveying 1,000 people. We ran our own research. And the responses were underwhelming. They were just sort of like, yeah, I'm interested. Yes, I know what it is. And maybe you could say we didn't ask the right questions or whatever it was. But we felt that it was a pretty good, kind of mark of that consumers are kind of underwhelmed by it all, unless there's a reason to sort of call you out on greenwashing, and then they're fired up. So today I have gathered an amazing group of panelists who are going to share their insights with us and help kind of demystify some of the things that we're seeing out there. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Henry, to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your work, and who you are.
Great. My name's Henry Hughes. I'm the EVP of marketing at Bobos. So we make the granola bars that hopefully most of you guys have seen around town and across the country. I've been with Bobos for about 8 years now. When I started, we were about a $7 million company. We'll do close to $100 million this year. So, through that growth, obviously, CSR and ESG have been, part on our roadmap and part of our plan as we've kind of built this brand that turned 20 this year. So, we've seen a lot of growth, and I think, we've also, even though CSR and ESG has been part of our roadmap and part of kind of the core of a lot of what we do, obviously, the power that we have today is a lot different than what we had 8 years ago. So, that's a lot of kind of the journey that we've been on, over the last years, and excited to share some of it with you.
Good morning. I am Christine Yeager, and I'm former Coca-Cola. This is my first event not representing Coca-Cola. I left in March, and but I feel like I'm probably in a good empathetic group of sort of understanding leaving something comfortable to go into something uncomfortable, which is definitely where I am. So I was at Coke for about 15 years. I started out in packaging graphics and very acutely aware that I was really just making trash and wanted to be a part of the change. But at the time, there weren't a lot of sustainability jobs that you didn't need to be an environmental scientist or a hydrologist to sort of be. So I spent 15 years sort of honing my skills on strategic direction, strategic decision-making, process improvement, program management, measurement, execution, all of those things, and then landed sort of the quote-unquote dream job at Coke as Director of Sustainability, PMO, where we were tasked to operationalize sustainability, so to move it beyond goals and commitments and into the business and execution and building it into the brand plans. Fast forward 2 years, they offered a very lucrative separation package, and I decided to go find the lifestyle I wanted and stop sort of pushing the heavy boulder up a steep hill where I felt like people were knocking the feet out from under me, and try something new. So here I am hoping that I can spend the next few years driving some material impact in the environmental sustainability space.
Hi everyone, I'm Carol Hsu. I lead sustainability at The North Face. Been with the brand for more than 8 years now, almost 9. And my background's actually in clothing and textile design. And I got interested in sustainability in college. At the North Face, I consider myself a generalist, so I work on anything related to our environmental footprint, but the biggest part of our footprint is in our products. So that's where I spend the most of my time working with our product development team, materials, merchandisers to plan future seasons and think about the different types of projects and partnerships we can make.
Open maybe. Oh, it's bad. Okay, because I was thinking maybe that's less distracting. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for being here. I guess we're going to start this. We were chatting on Monday to kind of prepare for this, and I think got right into the prompts, and we kind of backtracked, and we were like, why is the green space so gray? Like, why is that happening? And why is that a question that we can all answer? So I wanted to kind of throw that back to you all to dive into that. I know, Christine, you had some deep thoughts about this, like why it's so gray, as you've already indicated. But I would be curious to hear from all of you about that.
Couple of thoughts and reasons I feel like this space is so gray. One, it's relatively new, this idea of measuring it and tracking it and then sharing that out. Some people have been doing it for 20 years, but having a formalized general everybody process is new. So it's still evolving, right? Two, some of the sustainability things that need to happen feel as though they're in contrast with each other. So one example is glass, infinitely recyclable, great for reusability, does not end up in the ocean generally. And if it does, it just breaks down and becomes sand. But on the flip side, our infrastructure is not green enough to handle moving glass from point A to point B without driving obscene amounts of carbon emissions. So if you compare glass to plastic on some of the carbon footprint scales, glass is through the roof the worst choice. And plastic bags, for example, can show up as the best choice from a carbon footprint standpoint, especially if you use a plastic bag which is like, no, that doesn't make any sense, right? So sometimes these things are kind of working against each other, which then leads to the third point, which is that consumers then are confused and businesses are confused about what to do to really drive material impact and change.
Yeah, I guess one other thing that I see a lot in the business world is that supply chains are also not transparent. And if you look more at the fashion industry, we all know the stories about supply chains and how companies sometimes don't know who they're sourcing from. And so there's also, if you don't know your supply chain, how are you going to tell your customer about that supply chain? So on the manufacturing side, also there's work to be done to just really dig into who you're working with, who you're buying, who you're partnering with indirectly or directly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a big consumer education piece of this, and I know, I'll speak from Bobos. That's something that we as a brand don't feel like we can take on, right? Or we can, we're fitting into, the Cokes of the world are gonna, be able to tell this story a lot better and to a lot more people than we are. And I think that, where I see a lot of the confusion is, just consumer education. I mean, the examples that you're giving, are perfect because we're very focused. There's just a huge disconnect, I think, from the reality, and what consumers think is the truth. So,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that kind of show up in the survey that we did. Just that there just seems to be this conflict of like what they think it is versus what it really is, and then it's all just sort of flat. All right. Well, how have your teams, your various teams, navigated uncertainties in this space? Because since we've already kind of set this, statement that green is gray, and so that leaves it to be that with ESG and CSR as well, that everything is a little bit, sort of uncertain. And so it also seems that it's always changing. Like every week I feel like you read something about new regulations that have come out, or another brand that, got accused of greenwashing, even though that seemed like a perfectly safe stance to take at the time. So how do you all sort of navigate that within your teams and your company and your products?
Yeah, so ESG has been something that's been on our roadmap, but is been a relatively new thing that we've actually been able to wrap our arms around. We opened a new bakery about a year ago, consolidated all of our operations into one facility. This really allowed us to start to set a baseline of carbon emissions, our waste, and really start to wrap our arms around our environmental impact, which to the point earlier, we know our internal operations really well. It was really hard for us to wrap our arms around our impact. The thing that we've done is, we want to be very, very careful in this space. We don't want to be, we don't want to make statements that are ahead of where we are. We've partnered with a group, Impact IQ, to build, to help us create an ESG scorecard, so that we'll start to identify the areas where we have the most opportunity for improvement, where our biggest weakness is. I think the thing that we want to bring as an internal team is transparency to what we're doing. We know that this is something that we have a lot of aspirations about. We are far from perfect today. And, the biggest thing that I think that we can do where we are right now is understand, where are those biggest opportunities, to drive the biggest impact.
For the North Face, we deal with a lot of uncertainty in terms of data on our product emissions, our product impacts, and we oftentimes are just using directional information, yes, we believe that this will lead to a reduced environmental impact, or that this is a better choice. We don't know, we can't quantify exactly how much right now, but we know that it will directionally move us in the right direction, so we'll move forward because we don't want to just get into decision paralysis. There are frameworks and there's alignment that needs to be had in this space in terms of measurement, and we are really invested in regenerative agriculture for our raw materials that are naturally derived. We're still waiting for the greenhouse gas protocol to finalize their land sector removals guidance so that we know how to measure the impact that our farmers are having. So there's that gray areas can be really frustrating sometimes, but if we believe that what we're doing is the right thing, then we generally feel like we can move forward with our teams in terms of implementing these new projects. One other gray area that we face a lot is with materials sourcing. So materials are the highest impact part of our products. It's either dyeing or finishing the material, the raw material itself, or weaving, knitting the fabric. And we'll have vendors talk to us all the time. I talk to a lot of mills that will tell me they've got the most amazing, game-changing raw material that we have to use. It's going to save the planet. And we often don't have a lot of good data on that. And sometimes it's just a gut check. When we talk to partners, do we feel like they're being sincere? It's kind of strange to say that we might have to take a less like measured approach sometimes in who we work with, but if we feel like they are aligned with our values and like there is something really promising about what they're doing, then we want to partner with them versus someone who's just trying to sell us on the latest trend that we're seeing in the marketplace that we're a little suspicious of, or we might not feel confident in.
Kind of a relief to hear that, honestly, because in some ways I think like that's how we move forward. You can't, to your point about the paralysis, like when we were doing this work with this company, I did feel like there was a lot of like, we can't say that, or we can't do this, or we can't, and it's like, it's nice to know that on the product side that you're really seeing that, like you're like, okay, let's do a gut check here. Does this feel like the right fit? So I think that's actually very helpful to hear North Face taking that stance. Did you want to add to that?
No, I'm okay. We can go to the next question.
Okay. I realized I printed, which maybe wasn't pretty green. I printed what I had to say and then realized that I forgot the questions at home. So all I had was my intro. That's what I get for
paper's
printing.
recyclable.
Okay, good. I'll reuse it for notes later. All right. So what would you say are the 3 key elements of developing a framework for a CSR and ESG program? I know the frameworks could be slightly different, so feel free to answer to what you feel like you have the best handle on, that you think is critical moving into 24, given that there's been so much change recently.
Yeah, counter a little bit to what you said with the gut, which I think is great, but number 1, I think, would be to measure whatever you can in the context of your business. So if you're innovating, or you're a product business, or you're a service, whatever you're doing that is a transaction, try to measure, pick 1 or 2 sustainability or social focus things and measure it on everything that you do, whether it's carbon footprint or community impact or whatever those things are. Pick 1 or 2 and attach it to every transaction that you can in your context of your business. 2, I would say, is don't take the political landscape for granted. Take the time to understand how the current policies can either help you or hurt you in your business as you grow. It'll also help you then decide where you want to lean in as a brand, what's valuable to you to drive whatever it is that's important to your business. Again, back to those measurements. Then you can either benefit from some of the rebates or what have you within your business, or you can push for things to change that are currently hurting your business or slowing you down or costing you more money because you're trying to be a more sustainable business. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is, as much as you need to measure at a macro level, you also need to find those little nuggets that you can tell the story with. You got to showcase those little nuggets. Hopefully they are feeders for what you're going to do in the macro, but you can't always, especially with small brands, it's hard to have the macro impact. Like if Coca-Cola can fix recycling, that's going to have a massive impact, right? But it's not all within Coca-Cola's control, so they have to find those little examples of things that they're doing that are drawing material impact, whether it's putting in sort of waste removal in waterways, and it's only a small amount that actually gets recycled, but it's having real community impact in places like Mobile, Alabama, that aren't actually necessarily sustainably forward communities, but they are cleaning up their waste and it's not going into the ocean. So being able to find those little nuggets of examples of what you're really trying to do and then just showcase the hell out of them.
And Christine, sorry, before others answer, can you talk a little bit about that project? Just, I know what you're referencing with, and it would be interesting to kind of share, because I think that crosses the line with ESG and CSR, where Coca-Cola invested in to help do that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different companies that have these wastewater removal things. You may have heard of like the Interceptor, which is a really, really big one, but there's a small company called Osprey Initiatives, not to be confused with the apparel brand. They make these, they started out with a crab trap, and Coke invested in them to put, they had been sort of scattershot, like one here, one there, blah, blah, blah. But this company, what's so great about them is they evaluate where the litter is in a community. Then they work with the local municipality and the nonprofits in the area to really put those things in and then clean them up after every rain. And then it becomes part of the waste management strategy. So for example, Coke invested in coastal Louisiana. They sponsor a lot of events in New Orleans. There is a lot of waste that happens at those events because recycling isn't the best because people are, tailgating or whatever, right? So they put a bunch in this community and it's improving the amount of waste that goes out into the ocean. So if Coke can continue to invest in a community like New Orleans or Houston or Mobile, Alabama, in concert with the local community that's trying to clean it up anyway, then it just makes it that much more powerful and localized. Because that's the thing is like sustainability initiatives are so hyper-local and so macro, right? They have a huge macro impact for the entire climate, but yet the solutions have to really be super hyper-local, which again adds to that complexity, right?
Oh, Christine, yes.
Why did they choose those areas? Is that where their like manufacturing plants are located?
They have a couple of reasons. Louisiana, because Louisiana's recycling rate is like 6%, so it's really abysmal. So waste management in general is a challenge in the state of Louisiana, and then recycling is also a challenge. So there's just so much waste there. But there's a lot, like I said, a lot of events that Coke participates in. So they're bringing waste there. So they've got to try to leave things better where they found it. Texas, they picked Houston. Again, there was an event there, so it's something that they are participating in, that they're sponsoring. But also, Coke has a whole water replenishment strategy where they've identified priority watersheds based on where they operate and where it is also water stressed, and they are trying to replenish. And Houston, the Trinity River, is one of those. So they were able to both clean up the river from a waste problem standpoint. It's somewhere where they're sponsoring an event, so they have presence there, and it's also a water system that they draw on. So it's kind of a triple bang for the buck, if you will.
Do either you want to answer that? And I can repeat it too if it's helpful.
I can talk a little bit about kind of how we think about CSR, and I don't know if it's a clearly defined framework that we use, but just how we've kind of built out that program. It's something that we started 8 years ago with kind of the goal of really supporting the community that supported this brand to get it to this point. And I think one of the areas that we were really focused on is just the authenticity of the brand and the alignment with the organizations we partner with. Our motto at Bobos is bringing people home and feeding them like family. We've partnered, on a number of different levels with organizations, both national and in our community. And I think we've partnered if we partner with an organization, obviously there's a monetary piece of it. There's also a volunteer piece of it. We do, quarterly team volunteer days, which, I think obviously it's a great thing to kind of support something with your people that you're saying you're supporting publicly and donating the money to. But I also think culturally it's been a really valuable part of this program, because our team gets to see the impact that we're having, the communities we're supporting, through those events. So, and then we've taken it as far as, to create some consumer-facing products that are dedicated to these organizations. So we have, the Nora Bar is what we affectionately call our There With Care Bar, which is a nonprofit organization in Boulder that helps support families when they have children with terminal illnesses. There's a lot that goes into to that with the entire family unit, and they're really focused on how do we support this entire family and make sure that the kid that might not be sick still has toys at Christmas and things like that, as the parents are obviously focused on supporting their child through a medical event. So we created a bar with this little girl Nora, and created a package and did a lot of marketing behind that to get that out in the world. All proceeds from that bar go back to the organization. But that was really kind of also our way of raising awareness for the organization. We do we do have obviously some marketing muscle, not relative to Coke, but relative to There with Care. And, so we've, engaged in our PR team, our different paid media teams. We were able to, not only make this something that's, a monetary donation, but that's also driving awareness to this cause to consumers. So I think that's where we've had the most success, is having something that's integrated kind of all the way through the organization, and not just, not just writing a check, and really kind of, leaning in, at all levels. So.
And just, so there's no specific framework necessarily that like ties the CSR to any ESG goals or anything like that. It's just more like, is this going to be a good fit? Is this, and you're looking at more from like a marketing lens, right? Which is good. I mean, we want that. We want to see that.
No, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So this is, this is, part of what we do, from a marketing team. It's something that we believe needs to, our brand should do. It's something that, we have kind of obviously buy-in, all levels of the organization, but, ultimately there is a marketing aspect to it. It's not, it's a couple layers down, right? It's not why you're gonna pick up Bobos, but we find with our loyal consumers, it adds a dimension to the brand that consumers really want to see. Consumers want to invest and purchase brands that are, giving back to the community, doing the right thing, I think, in both CSR and ESG. And we hear that back from consumers all the time, as far as, I didn't realize you guys were doing this, but, it just, kind of further ingratiates us with them, so.
No, and I say that because I think that sometimes we poo-poo that storytelling piece or that marketing piece, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I think it's really important to, call attention to it with CSR. Like, it has to align. It has to be a marketable opportunity, because that's what's going to reach the consumer. So even if it's like, if there's no sort of alignment or it doesn't feel aligned, your consumer is going to miss it. They're not going to see it. And so it's not going to pull them in further into the storytelling of the brand. So I think I call attention to that because I want that to be okay. I want that to be a norm. I think brands sometimes shy away from saying, we're doing this for marketing. Like, they want it to be just for good. And it really shouldn't just be for good, because I think then there will be a miss for the consumer. So, Carol, did you want to add to what you kind of see as that framework piece?
Yeah, I'll just say some of the three pieces that I probably leverage the most when I'm working on how we prioritize initiatives. And one is, I think everyone should have a materiality assessment, so that you know what is material to your business. And it helps with future thinking. And similar to what you're saying, pay attention to policy. You're going to be more aware of what policy might impact your business. You'll be aware of what your competitors think will impact your business, what others in your industry are thinking. So that data, I think, is really helpful. On a similar lens, you can have consumers participate in a materiality assessment, but I also think consumer insights are really, really important. We leverage our loyalty program members because they're the most engaged with our brand to get insights from them. We also do have other ways of getting insights, and thankfully, it's always worked in my favor. When you think about an outdoor brand and the people who love our brand and buy our products, they care about the environment. They love exploring the environment. So I leverage the heck out of that information when I'm talking to our leadership team or other teams at the brand. And our most recent insights was great. We found that across all of the demographics that we either currently serve or we want to serve more, that we want to bring more into our brand, climate change and sustainability are the top three of their issues. So I take that information, I go to our teams, and if we are going to be a brand that grows and is meaningful to our consumers, we're going to listen to that, right? We need to address those concerns that our customers have. So leveraging that insights is super important. And then having supply chain traceability and transparency is going to be very important too. As I said, most of our emissions are in our materials, and those are emissions that our material suppliers are generating. So if we want to reduce that, we have to work with those suppliers. We have to have really strong relationships. We have a pretty tight supplier base, which I really appreciate. It helps me with my job. And so we can go to our mills and say, hey, we noticed that your footprint's pretty high. We do a lot of business with you. Would you be interested in participating in a decarbonization program? And we also work with other brands in our industry, actually, to co-nominate suppliers together. But if we didn't have that level of visibility, we wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't have the same leverage to really work on reducing those emissions. So I think that's pretty important.
You mentioned before about the suppliers that I now get. So when you say, for example, like your smaller suppliers and they're really genuine and they're very like committed, what kind of assistance can you provide them in gathering this data and in working with improving? Do you invest, let's say, like sort of financially for them to like get somebody to collect data and analyze, process, and also like structure initiatives?
Yeah, so there's a tool in our industry called, it's part of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. I don't know how many of you have heard of them, but they've developed a bunch of tools that our whole industry can use. And one of them is something called a Facilities Environmental Module. It's a survey that we actually do require our suppliers to fill out for us, and that tells us what their emissions footprint looks like, and we can then attribute it to our portion of their business. And we have teams that are in country, so where our suppliers are based, and they visit the suppliers pretty often. They'll help them fill out that survey. If they are in one of our decarbonization programs, we do also go on the ground with them to help them identify, like, hey, if you upgraded this machine, you could save this much. If you made like this change to your heat temperature setting on this machine, you could save a lot of energy. So we do have quite a bit of on-the-ground support, and it's really through our parent company, VF Corporation.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple of things. So Coke, similarly, the biggest carbon emitters for the brand or for the company are corn production and then plastic packaging, well, all packaging. Aluminum is also high in carbon footprint. But so with corn there's this thing called Field to Market, which is something that they can participate in, which again is also like a survey. And then my understanding is that the EPA rules are changing about what's required. And so as, again, you push for more of these things to be part of the policy landscape, then they become something that have to be also funded by the government because, again, we're not the only person that's buying corn out there, right? Company. So we buy a lot of corn, and so we do have some of that leverage, but that gets back to, like, you want to push for the political policy that can support driving some of these things and then create the funding to help smaller businesses participate in it. So that would be my point, I guess.
Did you have a question in the front?
Caroline, I had a follow-up for you. We're a company we help primarily track scope 1 and 2 emissions for companies, but realize scope 3. You guys are talking about your supply chain emissions. When you go in and making recommendations to the mill, right, on how to reduce emissions, right, set points or thermostats or do equipment more efficient, how are we coming to the point where you are confident you can make those recommendations, right? There's so much data, there's so many variables that go into those decisions. How do you narrow in on those actual recommendations?
Yeah, so we work with partners. There are a lot of really great organizations that are specifically working with suppliers in apparel and hard goods, soft good supply chains. So we work with the Apparel Impact Institute. They have a program called Clean by Design. We work with the International Finance Corporation. They have a program specifically for suppliers in Vietnam. There's a program with the German Development Agency. It's called GIZ, which doesn't translate well into English. And we partner with those organizations and also with other brands, oftentimes our competitors actually. So we co-fund some of this work. But the organization will provide on-the-ground support, and then our teams will also go in there to help the organizations. And a lot of it is baselining. So the first step is always understanding what that footprint is. since we are requiring suppliers to complete the facilities environmental module, they will have an understanding of that generally, but the baselining is the first part.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of the things you just talked about are also cost-cutting measures, right? So being able to tie back to the P&L is always going to make it easier for you to feel like this is the right investment.
Well, and that leads so nicely. Well, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Okay. That leads nicely into this next question, which is how does your team go about telling a story that satisfies consumers, internal stakeholders, board, shareholders, while also ensuring alignment with this potential framework or the work that you're doing? Because I think, and I'll just say, like, the project that we just wrapped up, that was hard. Like, we were really, we wanted to tell all these amazing stories that were coming out of, working with the farmers and working to, some of these really incredible programs that are happening on the ground, but there is a hesitation to share too much about that, and not sure whether or not and what we were trying to figure out with that survey was, did the consumers care? Did they want to know about what was happening on the ground in Vietnam? Or, was that important to hear from the farmers directly, to hear how their lives had changed because of some of these programs that had been implemented? So I'm curious how your team kind of goes about telling that story, again, either from the CSR perspective or the ESG, or both.
I mean, I'll say you kind of hit the nail on the head from internal stakeholders as far as, if it has a P&L impact, it's a lot easier to get internal alignment and to, get projects moved forward. We've done a lot of work around our packaging because that is one of the biggest opportunities that we have. A big project that we just completed about 6 months ago was redesigning all of our cartons so that we could ship them more efficiently on trucks. So we ended up getting 70% more product on trucks that we were shipping. Not only is that, great for our ESG goals, but it's also great for, our freight rates, right? Because we're taking a significant amount of trucks off the road and, don't have to pay for that freight. So I think, there's a lot of work that we do that is around efficiencies. I mean, efficiency and sustainability kind of go hand in hand a lot of the times. If we can do something more efficiently, usually it's going to help push us in the right direction on our sustainability goals. So that's where we've had a lot of our focus, because it's a great way for us to get resources and make sure that things get moved forward quickly.
So as far as a P&L return, it's easy to quantify with things like energy savings, but what about things like HR? Are you able to sell that kind of on the sustainability side?
Ooh, HR question. I'm the marketing guy.
He's going to call HR and get back to you.
Yeah. I know.
Inclusion, things that go through, we're talking about.
Oh,
Right.
you mean from the social side?
Yeah.
Just talking about
Right.
what about the other ones, and how do you sell that? Because that's maybe not as quantifiable.
Well, arguably, it has been quantified quite a bit, actually. Also, retention is a large financial benefit to a company. Coke's not that great at it because they have layoffs every 18 months, but as their former president of their women's business resource group, we looked a lot at how do you quantify this idea of having more women in senior leadership positions. And there has been a lot of research. leanin.org has put out a lot of research that shows that as you get more female leaders higher up in the organization, your business performs better. Similarly, ESG, while it's now a bad word, in many cases, it's all about risks and opportunities. How are you handling the business risk of environmental, social, and governance? So by the SEC passing these rules and all of these confusing guidelines that we're going to eventually learn more about, it will force the quantification of that business risk of having that social impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion baked into the long-term trajectory of your organization. And those those rating agencies, MSCI, some of those others, they've put out lots of reports about the, our return or whatever of ESG, rated ESG agencies, if they're rated as A or B or whatever their rating choice is, because there's multiple of these, that those businesses themselves are less likely to be affected by natural disasters, for examples. So even no matter where they are, because you can get a positive rating for either the E, the S, or the G, right? It doesn't all have to be in the E space. So there has been a lot of these quantifiable things that you can use, but then it gets down to strategy math, right? Which is a lot of what you're having to do. And I call strategy math like you're just sort of guessing, right? You're applying some sort of rule and assumption to the thing that you're trying to do, and you use that to project out a potential impact enough to get leadership to buy in for you to go actually get to execute something. And then you can learn, because there's just not enough until you think about your own business. But I think those are the resources you have to use. The leanin.org, the rating agencies, some of those use cases to then make an extrapolation against your business.
I think it's a really good question, too, and I'll just weigh in here for a second from the marketing side. For those that came in late, I represent Strat Labs, so we're a marketing and comms agency. And what I think is really interesting is that there is so much talk about sustainability in the E. There's so much emphasis on the E, and the S and the G sort of get left off in terms of the conversation. And I think, the E maybe has the best storytelling opportunities, and maybe that's the best way to market, or, to your point, like maybe it's more quantifiable because you could say all these things, but the S and the G are coming. Like that is going to be the next sort of wave of this, as we predict that's the next thing that we're going to have to measure, that we're going to have to be looking deeper in and really kind of deciding like what is the impact on the bottom line. To your point about, I think especially given the economic situation in our country right now and what we're kind of looking and what's looming, we are going to have to know like what are those sort of metrics. So I think you bring up a really interesting point that even as we developed this panel, we did tend to focus more. I mean, I know we're coming more from sustainability, but like, you're in marketing, you're not on the sustainability side, but we automatically went to that because it was easier to talk about. It has more story around it, has more metrics. So thank you. Did you want to add to that too? Oh, yes, please. Tell us more.
It was a fascinating exercise. I was employee number 1 of the social venture, and this woman, fantastic philanthropist, really wanted to do this, and she's like, yeah, and we thought about having this board, like really great people. We came up with these metrics that we think we should measure each company on, and everything that they came up with ended up being like nothing that any company has ever tracked. So the first thing I had to do was start looking at what were companies actually tracking, and then what was actually publicly available. And I would call companies and I would say, hey, I'm looking for this. What percentage of the women who take maternity leave in your company actually come back to your company afterwards? Which these are like numbers, percentages. They're like as clear cut as they can be. And either they would say like, oh, we never tracked that. We never thought anybody was interested. Or they would say, we tracked that, but since nobody's ever been interested, we don't publicly make that information available anywhere. And that was like 5-6 years ago, and the reality is still very much that. Either the companies think that nobody's looking and nobody cares, so they don't track it because it's money to track it, or they just track it internally so they can tell like everybody in the company like we're good employers, but they don't think who was looking.
Yeah, it's and it could be a great story to tell, like from a marketing lens. That's an amazing story to be able to tell, as long as it's positive. But I tend to lean toward that a lot of companies are doing some amazing things. They just don't know how to measure, track it, and then tell that story. So I want to know more about that after.
Yeah, and then how do you put it on your package, right? If you're a brand. If you're not a brand, then it's different. Or like if you're not a consumer brand. But how do you put that on the there's only so much space. So how are people making purchasing decisions because of that? Or are they making hiring decisions? Back to your point, the HR. Is it just more of an ESG report where people are like researching the company? Like where does the value really drive for the business on the flip side?
Did you want to, we were starting to get into this conversation around storytelling, which this is that. Do you want to talk a little bit about sort of the way that you kind of please everybody while you're trying to tell the story of what the work that you're doing or not?
Yeah, I can give an example on the marketing side of things and how we storytell with ambiguity. So we
I'm going to coin that. Storytell with ambiguity. I need that in my life.
We launched our first products that were made with cotton from U.S. cotton farmers that are implementing different regenerative practices. And as I mentioned, the measurement space is very gray. There's not a lot of guidance from a larger level, like a greenhouse gas protocol level, and there's debate about the science. Like, there's debate about how long does carbon stay sequestered in the soil? Is it long-term storage, short-term? What happens when climate change events come in and wipe out all the carbon that was stored in the soil? I got to know a few of our farmers working on this project. It was like a 3-year supply chain project before we actually had products in store in people's hands. And when I talked to my marketing team, I was like, look, we don't want to go down the path of claiming like this t-shirt was made with X number of greenhouse gas emissions, because no one even knows what that means. Like, if I told you this was 10 pounds of carbon, that means nothing. But I had met these farmers and I knew how amazing they were and how dedicated to this work they were, and how much risk they were taking in transforming their farming practices. These are American cotton farmers are multi-generational cotton farmers. So they've been taught by their parents and their grandparents and their uncles, this is how you farm. So for them to take these risks, it's huge. So we decided we wanted to, what we say, Trojan horse the science of regenerative agriculture in a really beautiful film, a short film that we made about one of our cotton farmers in Oklahoma. And it's entirely his story, his and his family story, actually, his wife and his parents. And it's beautiful and really moving, and they talk about what they've experienced firsthand. That is so much better than anyone at the North Face, me included, trying to tell a consumer, this is why this is important. If we can have the farmer sharing their story, it's so much more moving. So we didn't ignore it. We just did not talk about the climate change impacts whatsoever, because in a sense, that alienates people. Unfortunately, it's a very political, it automatically politicizes things when you mention climate change. And I didn't want that to belittle what the farmers were doing.
If you haven't, it's on the website, right? It's on North
It's on
Face.
YouTube. Yep,
Yeah,
it's on
it is amazing. Definitely check it out. I have to say, it is one of my favorite one of these campaigns, because it does humanize it and make it, I think as consumers, we forget, like, we hear so many of these words thrown around, and we just forget, like, there are people that have to change their practices, and this is their livelihood, and they're taking on risks, and to be able to do this, to be able to provide that sustainable coat you're wearing, and we can all just agree that the word carbon neutral or whatever it is, like, it just doesn't mean anything anymore. I mean, so I really love that campaign, so definitely check that out. What else? What else we got on the storytelling front? Oh, did you have a question?
Kind of related to that, have you all seen the Mother Nature ad by Apple? Any commentary on that?
I mean, I loved it. The idea of reporting to Mother Nature and for her to be like this, excuse me, badass, like, okay, maybe you're right. Like, she was just like, I don't know. I thought it was beautiful and a great, like, if we could actually report out on that type of stuff with that type of conviction that you're reporting to a CEO, is a good culture to try to build, I think.
And from the marketing agency standpoint, I'd say I loved it. I'm obsessed with it. I hate that I didn't think of it and that Apple put it out. Like, there was something about it that, like, it could have been tied to literally any other brand and it would have had more impact. But for me, I just think about, like, it was amazing. I mean, they're good at marketing. Like, they are really good at it. So, it's hard to, and I know most consumers aren't going to think that way, but in my head, I'm like, really, you're going to do this?
Right,
So,
they have a lot of cash.
Yeah.
We all know that if you go to business school, you learn that they have a lot of cash. And And it's a good thing that that's what they're using it for, but it's like in the context of their business, how much of their cash is really being put towards climate change versus everything else? Where are their reserves, you know?
Well, and their products and their labor and what they pay for labor, like everything. So for me, it was one of the most beautiful. I was like, this is everything, because we're trying to get these messages out there, but Apple. So and no, I mean, I love my phone, so don't take it away. Yes.
I just had a comment because it ties back to something you said earlier. That ad leans really heavily on the E, and they're able to put that shiny object there and let us all forget about the S and the G. To your exact point, they have a ton of cash. They're terrible when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Their labor practices, but the ad is so beautiful and so aspirational that it really does elevate their brand in the space and lets us forget about the S and the G.
Look, it is tough to be a big company and say anything on ESG and not be greenwashing in some way, right? It's really tough. I mean, you're a big company and you have a lot of power, and you could just cut away everything and spend all of your money on fixing the problems, but then you wouldn't have a company anymore, basically. So it's like, I've been thinking about this. I mean, this is generally a startup community, right? So to me, it's like, if you can start your brand thinking about the end of life and the circularity and the climate impact, then you don't have to go back and fix everything that you've sort of broken throughout the decades. And whether or not it's part of your core brand or core to your brand, right? It's still, if you're thinking about that, then you can sell on that as well over time, because from the data that I've found, over 50% of consumers are making purchasing decisions based on how good they feel about what the company's doing and the purpose that those companies have. So it's the general population now. Now they want it to be, they don't want to pay extra for it, but at the same time, should they? Like, should they be paying extra, or should Coke be paying extra, right? I don't know, it's tricky. Well.
I work in climate and social impact communications and PR. I was working with a large publicly traded company last year. It's a big climate friendly initiative of theirs. And we were completely hamstrung by the legal department every single step of the way. And the announcement ended up being watered down so much that when we finally went live, we got like one piece of news coverage and just landed with a complete flood. And so curious what your experiences have been on the storytelling side, getting these messages out and working with legal departments who are very risk averse.
Yeah, 1,000%. I was going to tell the storytelling example with the question anyway. So Coke has green Sprite, or used to have green Sprite bottles, and you probably didn't know this, but Fresca and some of the other brands are in these green bottles. And green bottles are recyclable. You're allowed to recycle them, but they downgrade the quality of the bale on the outside end of the materials recycling facility. Okay, so all of that took me about a minute to explain to you. So how am I supposed to put that on a package to explain to a consumer instantly, like, that this green bottle is now clear, it's not a different brand, it's not a new product, it's just the same Sprite, and you should feel better about choosing it. So they came up with the slogan, we can't say recyclable because that's not the claim, it's not more recyclable. We can't say, makes more recycled material, people don't really understand what that means. So they landed on new sip, same drip, right? So it's the new bottle, but it's the same liquid inside.
Also drip,
Yeah,
drip.
yeah, exactly. Well, because of the Sprite brand consumer. And so then they did a recycled record. So they made some songs out of recycled, sounds from a recycling facility and remixed them. Yeah? Cute, right? It's cute. Look, it felt relatively okay on the consumer side. They also didn't have a large budget. Because it's not materially driving the goals. However, the sustainability community, the policymakers, the NGOs out there, they loved that we finally did this. They're like, thank you, we've been asking you for years, please do this. Again, we're like a smaller percentage of the green plastic out there. It's mostly Pepsi that has the green plastic out there with Mountain Dew.
Ouch.
So, but it's like, y'all did it, and it's so awesome. And so the advice is like, it's very difficult to do the true sustainable thing that needs to be done and have a strong consumer claim against it. That's why you got to get back to like the macro and the storytelling, I think. You've got to have those showcase examples of like the labelless bottle that like doesn't really materially move any sort of material change and doesn't make it more recyclable. It uses less material sort of, but that material is often incinerated to energy anyway. But it looks really sexy and consumers are like, oh, look at this, right? So it's like you've got to kind of balance the what are you storytelling with and then the unsexy stuff. The unsexy stuff that's like really driving material change because the unsexy stuff is hard to make sexy is my advice, I guess.
I feel like, Henry, you have something to say. Did you have something to say about this?
Yeah, so I guess I totally understand where you guys are coming from. I think that part of the consumer confusion we talked about earlier is the lack of oversight for a lot of organizations. Yeah. There's not a legal department in every organization out there, so there are a lot of statements in the world that, can be put next to a brand name and feel accurate. And I think that that's just part of this, the confusion is, maybe there's too much control at some of the large multinationals, but also there's no control at a lot of companies too.
And I kind of sit in a weird space with this because working with large multinational, but then also working with startup and that world as well. I mean, I sort of wish everyone would just say, F it. Like, we're just going for it. And, you have to be true and honest and you have to believe in what you're doing, but like, you're going to get called out for these things. It's just the way the world works. And until these larger multinationals stop paying attention to it and stop putting resources to fight the bad PR and it's easy for me to say because it's not my company, but it's like we feed so much into the cancel culture that we can't get anything done. And so it delays our progress because we're not able to get through legal. I mean, we just finished this project and we couldn't get every statement we came up with, every thing that was marketing related that we claimed or we wanted to say was getting nixed. Like, it was like, no, can't do it, won't pass the test. Like, I don't even think it's worth taking to them. They're going to shoot it down. This is like a huge, multi-billion-dollar company. Like, so it's exhausting for the people that are doing it. And, Christine's here in Denver probably because she's exhausted from having to fight the fight. So if everyone would just stop, and it's funny, Allbirds, gave Allbirds, they were sued for greenwashing. If you all know this case of Allbirds. Okay, I won't get into the specifics, but the point was that it was amazing publicity for them because their claims were not. They are doing good things. They are not doing good things. They made a claim that was not 100% accurate. I don't think it has. I have a colleague that is in that it works for them and that is running that. From his standpoint, it didn't negatively impact them. If anything, it positively impacted them because they've been in the news so much and they didn't get canceled. How many people, anyone here own Allbirds? Like, they didn't get canceled. So I think there is, and I sort of applauded them. They're not huge and they kind of just went for it. And I think they made a misstep by not carefully analyzing what got put out there, but at the end of the day, they are doing good things. And so I think hopefully people will see that. So I know I stand sort of alone in this corner, but that's because I'm a marketer and I want to tell every story and be able to say it the way I want to say it. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, bigger brands get sued. Coca-Cola gets sued all day long, every day. So those lawyers have been sued 1 million times for so many things. And that's why they say no over and over again, right? Like, we got sued for saying 100% recyclable because 100% of the country does not properly recycle. So, it is a recyclable package, but like not everybody has 100% access to curbside recycling that is properly recyclable. Does that make sense?
Did the suit go to court? Or did you
Yeah, oh yeah. They stole my files because I was part of the project, even though I'm gone.
Carol, do you want to comment on what I say? Because I know you sit sort of on the other side, but I'd be curious, like, how does it feel to hear me say that? Like, I'm just like, put it out there.
I I agree that people need to put it out there, but I think people at brands don't always have the knowledge to communicate it correctly. And then you're misleading consumers.
Yeah.
So that's the probably, I mean, that's what we're all trying to prevent with our legal teams, is misleading you all.
Yeah.
So generally, we are so conservative. I mean, we're very conservative about everything that we do. I mean, working for the North Face, I get constantly compared to Patagonia. For 8 years, it's been happening. So, but I feel pretty confident in what we are doing as a brand. We might not talk about it, so you don't know, but at least, so there's the aspect of like, is it more important that we do it, or is it more important that we communicate it to you all, right? If we're gonna spend the resources, we're spending the resources on doing it. And then I'm really close with our legal team. I talk to them all the time. And I also train our marketing team on how to communicate. So we have a copywriter that works on pretty much most of our sustainable marketing. And she's been through a lot with me in legal, and she knows what she can say and what she can't. Sometimes we still get surprised and shut down on certain things that we thought would be fine, but it takes training and partnership, and if we can explain our intention with our legal team, they have more understanding and they can get creative with us.
Good point, actually.
So to answer your question, it's difficult, and maybe work for smaller brands who don't have a legal team and are less likely to get sued.
Christine and I are strategizing on that. We haven't even told you all that. Yes.
Mountains of pots that consumers had to give it back to the stores, thinking that they were all going to be recycled. And sometimes they give it back with like tons of coffee inside, and it would mold, and it was disgusting. Someone didn't think this through very well. Yeah. And it landed so well with consumers because everyone was so excited that all of their pots were recyclable, and they could just give it back to the brand, and the brand would take care of it.
Yeah, it's tricky because Coke has also shot innovations down that would probably drastically reduce their carbon footprint because it's not recyclable. They have a hard line. Like, recyclability has to happen. All of their packaging, and it's not just them, it's part of the U.S. Plastics Pact, that all packaging coming out of this company has to be recyclable. So they're shutting innovation down because the recycling system is antiquated. It has to be 4 inches or something like that in order to make it through. So if the material is recyclable, it can still be not recyclable because it'll fall through their things and then it'll go into landfill. It'll fall through the little squares because these municipalities have no funding to invest.
I know, just in the interest of time, and we're happy to stay and chat, but if you need to go, please do. I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. If you want to connect with any of us, obviously LinkedIn's always a great way. We also have some cards in the back for Strat Labs. Just grab it, and you can. I'd love to hear like where you all are working, what you all are working on, what you're doing. I think it's so interesting. This is such an interesting space to be in right now. It is really important that we have these conversations because without them, we don't move forward, and it's good to have different viewpoints, and it's interesting to hear what other brands are doing. And I think that happens on a large scale, but I also think it happens in these micro environments. And if you're just starting up, how many people here are in startup world in some capacity? Okay, so if you're just starting up too, I mean, definitely want to connect because laying the foundation for this is so important early on. If you do it right and not try to retrofit, you're going to have so much more success. It's going to be an easier lift. It's going to be less expensive, and the benefits are going to be tremendous. So I really am grateful that you're all here. We don't have to stop the conversation, but I just want to, if you do need to go, feel free. So thank you, and thank you to you all.